Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We've got folks from all over the globe dialing in. So we're so excited for everybody to join. And I think Kasha's going to kick it off.
Yep, so hi everyone. Welcome to our first meeting this year. I hope everyone's year has been off to a great start so far. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Kasha. I'm the director of this group at Ecosystem. Chad Quinn, our CEO, is here, as well as Mike Plaskow, our CTO, and Jen Camber, our Vice President of Customer Success. They're also going to be participating today. And we are thrilled to have Tamara Schenk, who is the Research Director at CSO Insights and a member of the advisory ecosystem, here with us. She's going to be leading a discussion on the 2019 sales landscape, featuring brand new sales enablement and buyer preferences research. Please chime in with any thoughts or questions about it. We want this to be a discussion and not a presentation. And then I wanted to go through a few logistics beforehand. So we're recording this so that we can share it with everyone afterwards. And if you could please mute yourself when you're not speaking so that we can reduce background noise, and turn your video on if you're at a computer to facilitate the conversation. I'm now going to hand this over to Chad, and Chad will provide an overview of our 2019 content agenda, which has been shaped by all of our recent conversations with you.
Thank you, Kasha. Hello. How is everybody? Great smiley faces. We're smiling in DC because it's spring-like. We are no polar vortex, very nice, beautiful weather. Hope it's nice in your part of the world. As I said before, we have folks from literally all over the world that are dialed in for our session in 2019. And I thought what I would do before we jump into our content is each of you has been very kind in giving up some time to talk to us about your priorities, talk to us about some hot buttons that you're focused on. And we continue to listen to that and continue to build out this content agenda for 2019. One thing I wanted to do is just give you a sense of what is on tap and some of the work that's in progress. So today's event, called the Sales Landscape 2019, Tamara Schenk, I'm so thrilled to have Tamara because we have the luxury with Tamara of having a member, so somebody that's with us and in it to win it ongoing, as well as somebody who's a subject matter expert on these topics and provides empirical research. So we're going to get a great session underway today on the 5th. We have another one in February. We're kind of double down on February. We have our second session is going to be on the 22nd. And that, I think it'll be a nice complement to this session because where we're talking today about buyer preferences and we're talking about sales enablement, in the late February session, we're going to be talking about this gap in talent that we see in the modern day seller and what are some attributes that we should be focused in on. So that'll be one to look out for in the late February timeframe. We also have, and this is something we encourage everybody to step up to, and if you are so inclined to do so, we'd love to help facilitate. We're going to have one of our members, Dave Klippel, from Palo Alto Networks, talk about his experience on how he built a value management practice, the do's, the don'ts, what worked, what didn't, and really have a nice facilitated session on value and how you introduce it into an organization in March. The next one, we are thrilled. We're kind of trying to lock down on a date. We're thrilled on all of these. This one's going to be kind of unique in that Eric Almquist, many of you may know he's a partner at Bain. He's written in Harvard Business Review. He's had 2 published articles on this concept of value elements. And he's going to be kind of sharing with us as the advisory members his research on these B2B value elements and how they go beyond just product value to aspirational value, to purpose value, different creative ways of looking at value beyond the obvious. And what we'll be doing in that session is literally having him share some of the research, and then ultimately having some Q&A with the members. Next slide, as we move forward, we have an outcome mapping. This is another great example where we're going to have a member, Alex in this case, from Turbonomic, is going to be sharing some really interesting leadership he's taken within his organization to map outcomes. So how do we go from a customer outcome and then reverse engineer back to our supplier capabilities? And then we've got Steve Silver, and some of these dates will flush out as we get further along. but Steve is a research director at Serious Decisions, now Forrester, and he'll be sharing with us a sales excellence platform and the role of AI in sales. So we're excited about that. And we've got some placeholders around value realization, as well as how that works. We'd love to get anybody who is so inclined to volunteer. We'd love to build a track around that in the back half of the year. And then this concept of outcome-based agreements. To what extent should we focus on outcomes, and how much should they be part of an overall partnering plan with our key accounts? So a little highlight on the overall content agenda, but to our topic at hand, it's exciting. As I said, Tamara has just been wonderful member already, contributing and helping shape today's agenda with us. She's got 25 years of experience in sales and business development and consulting. She's the research director at Chief Sales Officer Insights. So she really is somebody that's out there learning empirically about sales excellence, sales enablement, and what is the latest trends out there. And she's also a co-author around sales enablement. So we have the luxury of somebody who is a true subject matter expert in this regard. And so we're excited to bring her in to have this conversation with the members. I'll probably just note a couple things quickly for us, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tamara to begin, who joins us from Germany this evening. One is that we have, the members should have received the 2018 buyer preference study. So that was put out to everybody in full form. If you don't have it, we are happy to send it again as a follow-up. But that's one of the things that Tamara is going to be talking about. And that has, in terms of its methodology, 500 B2B buyers were surveyed with companies in excess of $250 million in revenue or more. So we have a really good sample size, I should say, of the buyers and what they're looking for from key suppliers going forward. That's one study that we'll dive into. And then the second is the 4th annual sales enablement study that is newly released. So we thank Tamara, because this membership group is kind of getting this information right fresh off the published press, so to speak, and how it's being distributed. That was 500 participants went into this study. Everyone from sales executives to sales enablement leaders to sales ops to sales managers, so really comprehensive in terms of the participants in that study. And what we'll be talking about is buyers, sellers, where there's alignment, where there's gaps, and hopefully have members chime in. As I know you all, we're very mission driven to make this a member participatory process ongoing. So with that, I will let Tamara jump in and start to share some of the results.
Thank you so much, Ted and Kasia, for opening the session. I'm really looking forward to share some of the highlights and the data points with you. And as Ted said, please feel free to ask your question as they come up. So we go to the next slide, and yeah, this is what we have prepared for you. So we'll talk about the highlights of the buyer preferences study, and then we will turn over to the sales enablement piece from a high level, and then we focus on customer engagement, because that's the topic that was closest aligned to all of you who are focused on value selling and value messaging and engineering these conversations. So then let's begin with the first one. So we all know a lot about the modern buyer, so to say, the buyer who is informed all the time. So we know that they are much better informed, but we don't know if they always understand all these things in their context. But what's definitely important, and that's an attribute that's growing more and more, is that B2B buyers are actually B2C consumers first. So we just simply, if you think about your private buying and shopping experiences, you just cannot switch this experience off. So in one way or another, you take this personalized, tailored B2C shopping experience with almost instant fulfillment to the workplace. And some of these experiences will shape the expectations you have when it comes to be buying. Of course, there are other attributes that play into this, but is this important? And that's an increasing trend we see. So we asked our buyers, and Chad already described the study, how are you doing this? So what are you doing on your own, and when would you like to connect and engage with a sales professional? And if we click on the next view, we can click it through until we have everything on the screen. Then we see that 70% of the buyers wait until after they have fully defined their needs. And then 44% are saying, we actually wait longer. We wait until we have already identified the solution we are looking for. And then there's a smaller group of 1/5 of the buyers, let's say we only want to lock down everything with a salesperson at the end when we've figured everything out. So for some people, this could be a depressing chart. I actually think it's not the case, because there's a lot of white space on the left-hand side, and this is actually where lead and demand generation come into play, where it's important to design your messaging in a way that you attract buyers earlier on when they are in their awareness phase. Think about the problem, how to solve it, how to tackle it, and when you're thinking about their needs and their solutions. If we go to the next one, I can show you. Just we'll go one back, please. So one back, please. It could look like they don't want to talk to sellers at all, but that's not the case, because we asked them, would you actually be willing to engage sellers earlier? And you've already seen the number. The number is 90%, 90. So that means 90% of this group of executive buyers are actually saying, yes, we would be willing to engage sellers earlier in specific situations. And the situations are, if a buying situation is new for them, that means there's a problem they have to solve they've never solved before. If the buying situation is complex, it means they have to get an alignment across different functions. Or if it's, of course, risky for the organization they make the buying decision for, and that's often overlooked, if it's risky for their personal career. So that is a very interesting finding, and it's actually very encouraging. So now the question is, why are they not doing it more often? And then we go to the next slide, or we just look at the top of it. We asked these buyers, what are your top 3 resources you turn to when you have to solve a business problem? And now let's have a look at 1, 2, 3, what those are. Experts from their industry, third parties, vendor websites, events, conferences, and then it goes on with social networks, social communities, industry communities, fairs, and stuff like this, until we come to number 9. And number 9 is salespeople. So that's the big discrepancy we see. So 90% of the buyers would actually say we would be willing to engage sellers earlier in many different situations. We have seen these 4 criteria, and you can apply these criteria to a lot of opportunities. And then the question is, why are they not doing it more often? It's simply because they perceive salespeople more as salespeople, but not so much as problem solvers. And that is one of the big challenges, and I think this is where the whole enablement trend turns into, and where all these efforts you are doing in this group to focus on value selling and to get this right is really, really key to success. So how does that resonate with you? Any instant feedback, any instant questions you have at this point?
Yeah, Tamara,
please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Isabel Snowby here. Nice to speak with you. This definitely resonates with us over on the IBM side. We've been trying to do this for several years now, trying to pivot from selling products, which is where our sellers are most comfortable, to going to sell outcomes, and even more so in the context of the industry that the buyer's in. And, this has become a lot more complicated for our sellers because when we had the shift of IT spend over to the C-suite, suddenly they have to get outside the data center and they have to start talking about business problems, business transformation.
Yeah.
Right. And they also have to go through probably about, anywhere from 5 to 7 to 10 different buying departments, through the selling process. So it's become, infinitely more complex. And, and so this is like a whole style that that's consultative value-based selling that we're having to train our sellers on and really build their confidence, because a lot of them just don't have the confidence to go in and talk to the C-suite.
Right.
They don't want to do it. So.
Yeah. Even if you have the right messages, if you don't feel comfortable to have this conversation with a finance function, you avoid it. You just continue to talk to IT. So I had my past experience at IT systems, and I noticed exactly at this time when everything went into the cloud and all of a sudden it was no longer successful to talk about your data center because it was no longer of any interest and value. And at the same time, what I experienced, the chief financial officers asked the question, so the cost saving is great, but what does that mean in my EBIT program?
That's exactly right.
And that's a very different game.
Yes.
So we're right into this, yeah. And it's now really, this happened a couple of years ago already in the IT industry, and those industries are the ones that focus on sales enablement for many more years than others. So the earlier the disruption, the bigger the need to change. Yeah, maybe let's just continue to the next one, because we also asked the buyers. Yeah, Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's any data to resolve just the classic issue that I see. So the first point that you made is, when they want to engage, and then the second question is whether they will engage earlier. And if you look at it, complexity and newness seem to be the big drivers there. But the problem is that the buyers might view things as simple when in fact they're much more nuanced than they believe. Right? So is there any data to show that the difference between perceived simplicity or perceived complexity and how to do that? Because you don't want to market everything as being way complex, which then puts you at a disadvantage in getting to talk to them earlier.
Yeah, that's a great point. So first of all, I have not a specific data point on that, but I think it's an ability we should develop sellers on to show their prospects the actual business impact of the problem they're dealing with. So I think that's probably what you mean. So buyers may have a certain perception of a problem, but actually it is much bigger and also more expensive. It makes their opportunity bigger. That's all about tackling this from a business perspective. So for instance, if I have a business process outsourcing for a certain part of the process, and you can actually tell them, so this is not enough. So you have to think about these use cases and these specific scenarios and this one as well. And you have to connect that to different other systems. Just as an example, it's not a very good one, but showing the impact. And it's a little bit about the scope of the problem and the business impact. And what I'm always a big fan of, showing customers the cost of doing nothing, to help them then to see, okay, this is what you actually could achieve in terms of your desired outcome. But we come to these specific customer engagement practices in a few minutes. Yeah. So we asked them as well, what are the attributes, what are the behaviors you would like to see salespeople to apply more often, more consistently? And they were 4 behaviors they asked for. And you will be surprised if you look at them. You can just click them through, Diana. None of these behaviors has anything to do with product. So that's the first thing. And that's not a new thing. So Forrester has seen this, I think, almost 8 years ago, asking what are the behaviors buyers are looking for, what they would like to see sellers do more often, more consistently. Also at this point, product was not included. So first of all, understand my business and my role. That's always a big complaint. They were excellent at their own products and stuff and representing their company rather than really understanding my role. So preparation is mandatory. It's not luxury, it's mandatory. So that also implies a shift in sales management practices to focus on quality rather than quality. Then excellent communication skills. That might sound simple for some of you. It's actually not if you consider that we have so many different communication channels now, and there is an expectation that sellers are excellent in all of them, and especially in those their buyers prefer. So that simply has to be mastered. And then the hard part is providing insights and expertise, and that's directly related to outcome selling, to creating and showing the business value that's connected to a certain solution that solves a problem. So this is really translating everything that's product and features and functions into the business context of the buying team. And also interesting, the last part of it, and that's the core of sales enablement, to make sure that this is happening. And the last part, it's very often overlooked, is focus on post-sale. So that doesn't mean your salespeople should be the better service associates, but it definitely means don't walk away. So for a buyer, a buying decision is just a milestone, just something that's really important to them, and that's implementing your solutions and creating and realizing the value they bought from you. So why would you spend a lot of time to develop that relationship and walk away? So we often talk about sales and marketing alignment, but we don't talk so often about sales and service alignment. That's really, really important, that there is a good integration happening, and that sales and service professionals are working on a certain account together to make sure that there is at least a responsiveness.
Hey, Tamara.
Any surprises here?
Hey, Tamara, this is Craig Jones. I think this is an excellent kind of reference point. I focus on the excellent communications piece. I've done a lot of work over the last few years of really trying to understand that buyer's journey from a personality as a temperament perspective. And over the last couple of weeks, we just, as a team, completed a book by Kathleen Edelman. It's called "I Said This, You Heard That," and it really breaks down the social styles around, how people respond and how people say things, and what those words mean in the communication. So communications really, really matter as it relates to kind of getting in the process further away.
Excellent observation and a great book recommendation. Thank you. Any other questions here? Any other things you perceive differently?
Tamara, it's Chad. I guess, I am interested in that focus on post-sale, because I think that's really something that in an as-a-service economy becomes much more, as opposed to kind of an on-prem environment or a licensing traditional. Now that we are renting and not owning, it does strike me that the post-sales is far more important, and I guess that's interesting that that's come up in the research from the buyer as well.
Absolutely. I just think about certain business models, the ones you mentioned, then very often the service team is actually creating the revenue, whereas the salesperson has sold a frame contract, and the revenue is actually generated month by month by the service team. So yeah, it's really important to focus on that integration as well. And for sellers, I'm always saying, hey, you want to create additional business opportunities in that account, so why would you not nurture these relationships? And if it's only that you make sure that you communicate the value that has been created to the initial executive sponsors that were involved, I mean, that can create the next opportunity for you on a silver tablet. So in an ideal world, these are definitely steps that are often overlooked and can actually be very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, should we look at the other side of the coin, at the sales enablement side of it? Let's just have a look at some high-level data. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time in framing things out and defining sales enablement. If you have had the chance to look at the report, and you know how we at CSO Insights define that as a really more strategic discipline that's out there to increase and to drive sustainable sales results by providing consistent enablement services that are effective and consistent at the same time. We always include salespeople, customer-facing people actually, and their managers to make sure that they have valuable conversations, interactions at each stage of the customer's path. So that's the bigger picture what we're looking at. We don't look at a specific content, training, or coaching or tool part. We look at it more holistically. So this is, if you have to create a business case for sales enablement for your sponsors and channel, this is your money chart you should use to do this. So if we look at key performance metrics like win rates, forecast deals, and quota attainment, then it's very clear that organizations with no sales enablement at all have very different numbers compared to those that have a sales enablement person, team, or function. So if you look at the differences in points, that's already significant. And if you look at the actual improvement you can calculate, and it definitely makes a lot of sense to invest in sales enablement. Now, the question is, how should I do that? And how should organizations invest in sales enablement to get to these numbers? Now we can go to the next one. And that's actually a very interesting data point that looks at the issue one level deeper. So overall, it makes sense to invest in sales enablement because it definitely drives results, and not only in 2018, also in the years before. Now, if we ask a bit more specifically, did you actually achieve or could you live up to the expectations, meet the expectations your sponsors had into your enablement initiative, program, or function? Then it's interesting to see that there is actually around 1/3 of the study participants with an enablement function that said, yes, we met or exceeded all expectations, or we met the majority of all expectations. And as you can see with the next click, that this 1/3 has much better results. Yeah. So there is a big blue area. This is around 61 to 2% of organizations. They said we met some expectations. That's already okay, but that's only an okay result because their performance data didn't create significant improvements. So they were a bit better than average, but they were not significantly better than average. So, and this is where we want to get sales enablement out of, which is why we're saying the discipline is maturing and is growing up, but not fast enough. At the top of the bottom, there is also good news because the group of organizations that said we only met a few expectations, that was around 10% last year. And it's less than 2% in 2017 and only less than 2% in 2018. So that's a big improvement. So we see that organizations make progress, they make things better. We just have too many organizations in this middle area where it can always be a bit dangerous if you don't have a significant impact. So when there is a bad quarter or maybe 2 bad quarters and some finance guys are asking you, what are you actually doing in sales enablement? Do we need that? So then it's always good to have a better business case than this one. So this is why we have this in the title. The discipline is definitely growing up, but not fast enough. Any questions, observations from your end?
A quick question. I mean, does the research review some of the top best practices in sales?
I could not hear this.
Can you hear me now?
Could somebody else hear it?
I think that was Vinicius.
Yeah.
And he may have a tough line there.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
No. It's a little.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's really broken up.
Yeah, so maybe you can put it in a chat and we take it then later. Happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll monitor the chat on our end, Vinicius, if you want to pose it there.
Yeah.
Other questions on this slide for the larger membership?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one question on the sales enablement. Did it go a level deeper around what kind of sales enablement, i.e., certifiable or certification-based sales enablement, or just kind of self-paced kind of self-enablement?
So yeah, in the study goes way deeper. So we look at all the different services. We look at customer engagement practices, and we'll share a few here in a minute. We looked at the rankings, the perception of effectiveness of all the various training services. We looked at internal content, at customer-facing content, and how it is perceived. We looked at collaboration, the cross-functional cooperation that has to take place, and how organizations are doing this. We looked at the internal processes that have to be in place to make sure that consistent and effective enablement service can actually be produced. We looked at the fact how organizations measure their success, if they have a strategy, if they have a charter, if they follow the customer's path, all these things. Yeah, we followed our sales enablement diamond, the clarity model. So there's a lot of research around there. We just didn't want to throw all the data points at you. We wanted to focus on having a conversation. So then let's just, if that was the question Vinicius had, then I think we just move on and look at the next one. Yeah, customer engagement. So I wanted to highlight a few findings in this area for you, because they are closely related to the discussions we have in outcome selling. So the step one to customer engagement, it is what we see now for a couple of years, is the question how well organizations align their internal processes to the customer's path. And if we're honest with ourselves, if you look at the entire customer's path, including the customer's implementation adoption phase and the entire awareness phase, we actually have to make sure that we have integrated marketing, sales, and service processes. If you want to call all of these selling processes, that's totally fine. The question is what percentage of organizations actually make sure that they reflect all the steps and gates their buyers have to go through to move a deal forward, that this is reflected in your internal process chain. So what we've seen in this study is that around 20% of organizations are doing this, and they achieve better quota attainment rates. So they improve their quota attainment rate by 8 to 9%. So for sales enablement, this is actually a foundation that's usually connected more to sales operations. I'm always saying, if you have a great sales ops team that's taking care of this, excellent, then it's a foundation for you. If that's not the case, you should collaborate with sales operations, customer experience, and your customers and do the work. Yeah, because enablement services cannot exist in a vacuum. So they should always be connected to your process landscape in one way or another. So it's really a foundational thing to get this right. Any questions to aligning selling processes to the customer's path? Are you all doing this already? You are all in this 20%.
Actually, this is Kate Katowski. I think you actually bring up a really interesting point. I'm wondering, I'd love to double click on that a little bit more and learn about, do you recall, were there common processes that you found that companies were improving that helped enable that increase of quota attainment? Were these inquiry to order processes or order to remittance, or just curious about what particular processes inside the customer journey?
It's the process chain. It's definitely the integration of this process chain, and that we simply reflect the different stages buyers have to go through, that we reflect them in this internal process chain. So only this way you can make sure that you are not running into a misalignment, and you don't have a situation where a seller says, we're closing the deal next week, and the buyer is not even sure if he wants to tackle the problem in the first place. So, and if you make sure that all these necessary gates buyers go through from your customers' path are reflected in your process, that will come up in every coaching session on the deal, so that you're sure, okay, this is where we're at. That's actually the main purpose of it. And also, if you can use technology to learn about changes along the customer's path, that's great, because it should also be fast in terms of making adjustments. So there was another question in the chat. I just couldn't read it so fast.
It says, how would you recommend aligning to the customer path when selling solutions that can apply to multiple types of buyers?
Yeah, so that's a great point, because there is no such thing as one customer's path. This is just a framework we show here that helps you to get your head around the idea. So if you have different portfolio segments that solve different customer problems, I would definitely look at these different customer journeys, or customer path in plural then. But it's, you don't need it detailed for every customer, just for the use case. So if you have a complex buying scenario, maybe you have also a renewal scenario, or you have a more transactional scenario for other parts of your portfolio, I would focus on these different scenarios. Maybe you've also different sales process scenarios implemented already in your CRM, then I would try to connect the dots to these typical customer paths, so that you have selling/buying scenarios connected to each other. So that answered the question. Thank you. So that is for us. Well, yeah.
A couple of questions. One, just given my experience, when you look at the alignment cross-functionally around the customer journey and these paths, I've found without strong executive sponsorship within an organization, trying to get that alignment across functions is one, extremely difficult, and two, then results in, if that's not there, results in fragmented, process across functions. Can you speak to your experience briefly on that point?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. This is one of the key critical success factors for sales enablement. It's one thing to orient around the customer's path, and the other one is having a strategy that's connected to your senior executive sponsors' strategic initiatives and their desired outcomes. It is definitely a must. I agree completely. Yeah. This is why this work, is so important, that we don't begin with enablement initiatives on a tactical level. It will end in nowhere. Yeah, and this is also how enablement teams then will be treated. Yeah, you do a program, you do a thing, you do an activity. It's really worth the time to develop this strategy, to really make an assessment. What are the challenges in this organization? What is the business strategy? What are the goals we have to achieve? And how do we have to design our sales enablement strategy that it helps to achieve these goals, that it helps to drive these strategic initiatives forward? And then you will have the sponsors, but you have to have this business level discussion to get the sponsors and to map your strategy out the right way. And then those issues will come on the table, and you usually need an advisory board to make decisions on this.
Perfect. And then the second question, the other, I think you touched on it earlier, when you talk about use cases and having a well-defined set of use cases that map to the people that are going to use your product and services that support those business outcomes. I've also found that that's absolutely critical. If you don't have that foundational definition of use cases, it makes it very difficult to drive consistency and scalability when you start talking about business outcomes with customers across.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. So we have a few findings that actually speak to that because it goes more into the details of customer engagement. So the next thing we ask the study participants, okay, we know how well you have your processes aligned to the customer's path now. How well do you actually align your enablement services to the customer's path. And we looked at content, training, tools, and coaching services. And interestingly, 42% said, yes, we do this. We fully agree. We align our enablement service to the customer's path. We said, oh, wow, that's actually a great number. And we could also see that this group, these 42%, have actually much better win rates. So, I mean, 53 to 5% compared to 49 at 5. So everyone who was ever responsible for win rate knows that just a percentage point can make or break a fiscal year. So that's a considerable improvement. And also here, the downside is even more important. So the smaller group that completely disagreed, so they had win rates way below gambling in Vegas. Yeah, so there is definitely a room for improvement. So, and then we asked them, okay, if you're saying, yes, you align all your enablement service to the customer's path, how are you actually doing this? So we asked them about their feedback for a few specific practices. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see that. We asked them about tailoring content to industries, tailoring content to the customer's path, phases, and to the customer's challenges. That means to the problems you can solve for them. We also asked them about tailoring content to buyer roles. So that was one of the buyer preferences. Yeah, be prepared regarding my role, my challenge. So that's here in the middle. And we also asked them, how good are you? How well do you leverage social media to get these messages out? And interestingly, a bit more than 1/3 said, yes, we tailor our content to industries, and only about 1/4 said, we tailor content to the customer's path, buyer challenges, to buyer roles, and we also leverage social media. The question is, what's the practice that has the most impact? And then we go in the next one, and then we see all of them have some impact, but definitely the two in the middle have the biggest impact in terms of win rates or forecast deals. So it definitely makes sense if you have limited resources, and we all have, that you focus on tailoring content to the different phases of the customer's path and the buyer's challenges. That means the problems you can solve. And then also tailoring content to buyer roles. So we talked earlier on about, you know, decision makers are out of the IT department. Now finance roles are asking for business cases, things like that. So this is what we mean here, tailoring content and specifically the messaging and the content to these different buyer roles. So that has a specific impact. And we've seen that only around 1/4 of the organizations are actually doing these specific practices. So that's what we wanted to share around customer engagement with you. Any observations, any feedback, any questions from your end?
Just one comment. I mean, to me, these two things, they are completely related to the communication skills that you highlighted before, right? So if you're a great communicator, you're going to nail these two things way more naturally. And unfortunately, yeah, I think we don't hire based on those things. First place, we look at many other things, more technical skills. When in fact, I mean, if you want to sell outcomes, I mean, you need to connect to the person, and this is a pretty good insight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's not enough to provide the content with the right messaging and put that out to the sales. So that's not working. This is just a prerequisite. We also have to make sure that we develop these skills so that people are confident in applying these messages. It's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's the related training part we need when it comes to value messaging specifically and having these conversations with different buyer roles. And it also highlights the need for sales coaching. So I cannot do everything from an enablement team. Only I have to make sure that my sales managers are equipped and also developed as sales coaches, and that they can coach on those desired behaviors on a regular basis.
And do you think that that's enough for you to convert a person that has been selling transactionally for his or her whole life into an outcome selling person? Because this is one of the biggest challenges that we have at HP, right? So
yeah,
we're transactional centric. Now we're moving into this outcome selling, and it's a struggle and a challenge for us to, you know, change.
Absolutely, it's a very big change. It's definitely changing the role upside down, especially if somebody comes from very transactional background, it's a very different role. And what we also see here, we usually have to do with different buyer roles in a buying team. So there is also this skill important to orchestrate a buying team, to lead a buying team towards an outcome, and to develop this future vision of their success. It's also a skill that's important, especially in the early phases. You know, it's always important to figure out, is this a person who wants to change? If there's a person who wants to change, you can achieve a lot.
Exactly.
But you have people that say, you know what, I make my numbers, what do you want? Then it's very hard to do it. So we've seen that in my previous position too. You can't change everybody. So people have to see this. This is why whenever you drive such initiative, the why story is so important. Why do we need to change? Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to learn having these different conversations? Not because we want to make your life harder, it's simply because it's necessary to be successful in the future. So this why story, this change story is very often overlooked. So we're all good at telling people what to do, when, and how to do it, but why? It's very often not answered. And this is where sales leadership comes into play too. Any other observations?
No, but I'd love your opinion on. I'd love your opinion on where the biggest impact is. So I kind of split a sales organization into three, right? The way bottom, and they're probably in the wrong job. The high flyers, and they'll succeed all the time. And then the mediocre in the middle. So, I mean, intuitively, I'm looking at all this and saying the biggest impact is on the mediocre and moving them up a bit.
Absolutely.
But, okay, so you know, it's not getting the top 20% even better. It's just moving the bulk.
A great point, and thanks for bringing that up, Peter. It brings us down to what is the focus of sales enablement? Are we doing this for A players? No, they don't need us. Even if we don't put anything in front of them, they will have the right piece of content, or they are going without content and putting everything on a flip chart with the client. They always know what to do. And those are the people who change a meeting within a few seconds and do everything differently because their intuition tells them how to do it differently. What we want to do as sales enablement teams, we want to learn from the A players. What is it that makes them so successful? And what of these attributes can we use to make better enablement services for the B players? Yeah, it's a very important point. So I always try to, in my previous role, to challenge stuff with A players, to ask them, are we on the right way with this kind of messaging? Or if we create a playbook format like this, would that work? And they usually said, well, I don't need it, but it will be useful for others. And then if you've shown them something from a different part of the portfolio they were not familiar with, they said, oh, it could actually be useful. So their feedback can really help you as a guidance to increase the quality of your enablement services. And also listen to the sales managers at the front line, what are really the issues they are dealing with, also helps to get this right. Yeah, Chad, I'm looking at the time. It's 10 minutes to the top of the hour.
Yeah, I love the interaction. Just terrific questions throughout. So I just, maybe before we close out on this session and talk about our next session, just for Tamara, are there any questions that you had either on the buyer preference study that Tamara went through, or this fourth annual sales enablement study that has just newly been released? Want to make sure we have an opportunity for any member to ask any questions before we close out.
Hey, Chad, just one more question for Tamara. When you look at the different types of buyer profiles, so looking at the study, someone that is a risk taker versus someone that needs to typically go through a very formal process, can you just speak briefly to how that plays into whether it be enablement, whether it be the sales process, how you're engaging with a customer based on those buyer profiles?
Excellent question, Ben. Yeah, we've mentioned this in the last part of the buyer study. Yeah, so if you can read your buyers in terms of what is their decision-making style, that also helps a lot in terms of how you present the messages that are for this role and you want to get across. So as an example, if you figure out you have a very control-focused decision maker, then you probably want to provide scenarios and alternatives for them so that they always feel to be in control and can pick scenarios and ideas that work for them, and actually at the end of the day saying, oh, this is my idea, great, but you sold it to them. So that would be a way to engage a control-driven person. Then you can have persons who are very detailed-oriented. So they are fine with the business case in an Excel format. You go through them line item by line item. If you have the more visionary decision maker, they will walk away before you even open that. So for them, you would prepare a light, a high-level visionary approach that gives them the confidence that when you're talking about how the approach would work, and they will delegate the details to their colleagues. So yeah, that is very important to read. And also here, A players have this innate feeling and they don't even know what they're doing, but they have the sense of how to approach these persons. And for others, it's a skill that can be learned. How can I read these different decision-making styles?
Yeah, I was really glad to read that purely because we're starting to look at incorporating those types of concepts into our sales process. So it was good to see that validated.
Good. Yeah. Excellent.
Any last questions for Tamara? Well, excellent. Tamara, thank you so much. Again, I want to close as we opened that Tamara is a member. So this is, for all of us, I think this was a great primer and probably created some curiosity on some points. We'd love the dialogue to continue. So don't feel as if this is kind of a one and done. But with everyone in the LinkedIn group around outcome selling, you'll have the options and ability to kind of follow up with some next steps and be able to provide more context on any of the points that you have discussed. One thing I want to make available, or we want to make available for all the members, is this concept of a case study. So Tamara has been generous to suggest that if members are going through a transformation right now and really feel like this is a story that they would like to tell and want some kind of analytics behind it or some packaging behind it, as it may help to some of the earlier points, create some legitimacy or credibility within a sales support or sales enablement or value management function. Tamara is open and her organization are open to doing that. Ecosystems will help out in any way possible. And I'll just let Tamara maybe talk a little bit about the case study process and any details for members that they want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chad. Yeah, we wanted to make this as simple as possible for you. So the time is really limited. You would need to invest on this. So we have a structured interview approach with a set of predefined questions you also can prepare for. We would record the call and we would then go into the creation of this case study asset and we will play it back to you for approval and for fine-tuning. And that's actually about it. So it will be co-branded with these insights and with ecosystems, and you would have a nice asset to use it in your organization to promote your success. And we would also, when we have buyers in our communities, in our research groups that are interested in learning more about specific case studies, you'll be able to use it as well. So that would be the approach. So we are looking forward to great stories in this group. So if you have one, please feel free to share it with us, and you would think you get a great asset you could be proud of. Yeah, and research, great research requires great survey takers. So this is really turned out to be the most challenging part of our roles nowadays, to recruit survey participants for the research we are doing. So we are currently recruiting participants for our sales practices study. So we do this in a biannual rhythm. So the last one was 2017. So we go over more than 60 practices. You simply can decide on I strongly disagree until I fully agree. There are a few matrix questions to put that into context. We would really love to have you as study participants. It takes you, depending on the role, you log in between 10, 15, or maybe a bit more minutes to complete this survey. Here is the link in it. You get the full report as soon as we publish it for clients and members. Also, survey participants get the full report early on before it is open market. And you will also get another piece of research as a thank you for doing that. So thank you in advance for helping us with this one. Yeah, and if you are looking for more research, please feel free to go to csoinsights.com. There is a menu that's called Research Studies, and you can download the ones we highlighted here. You already have or get in advance. There is also our 2018-19 sales performance study, now open market and available for download. So you also might have a look at this one. And to prepare Dave Brock's session, I'm really sad and I won't be on this call because will be on the 22nd on a flight to Scotland. But we also have done in 2018 a sales talent study, so that could also be a great read or inspiration for the conversation with Dave. And of course, the Sales Enablement book Byron and I have written, so for those of you who look more for a holistic model and how to tackle the challenges in your organization, that would be the book for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you for being a member. We enjoyed and sharing all this research. I think every one of the members, just based on the level of engagement and questions, I think it was meaningful, impactful to see some of this emerging research on sales enablement and the buyer. What I love too is, I think Craig talked about it, Vinicius talked about it, you referenced it, is this concept of the excellent communication skills and us trying to think through the right model for sales talent is exactly the next conversation we're going to have on February 22nd about what those attributes look like for the modern seller. And obviously, excellent communication skills is one of the critical disciplines. And we've actually listed out more, and we'll dive into that topic with you on the 22nd. But just grateful for all the participation. Thank you, Tamara, for being both a member and a content contributor to the advisory. And with that, we always want to have a reputation of starting on time and ending on time to be respectful of everybody's busy agenda. So we are going to adjourn. I would say, just in closing, if there's anything that we're kind of neurotic, we want this to be the best hour that you spend in your day. If there's things that you think worked and that we should double down on, please send that to Kasia and myself. We'll all read it. In terms of our session, if there's things that you want us to focus in on future sessions, just any candid feedback around our advisory, we take very seriously, and we want to constantly revise and edit it going forward. So feel free to shoot us a note about today's session, and thank you all. I hope you have a great day.